Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey chapter 300.
441.
It is the last day of the week, aka the Big Bang Attack workout. I'm feeling very good right now, very excited for this workout. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. It is finally time to start a series that I've been wanting to start for a while now, and it is about the soul. Now, in this first part, we're going to be looking at inner monologue. So in today's episode, we're going to be, first, I want to just generalize before we get into the inner monologue part of it. The soul. I think this is a concept in which case many people understand it inherently. Not everybody, but many people do. And it's one of those things that it goes beyond what we know here. There are some people that don't believe in it at all, but there are many who do, or inherently understand that there is something there to it. Whether they have the spiritual manifestation of a soul, or even just hearing it within music, or watching it within a movie, or something like seeing it in an art form, or another thing in between. The idea or the expression of soul is something that I think isn't unique to one individual, but more so a collective of the conscious mind. If you are a person, regardless of race, gender, cultural background, or whatever it is, there's always an understanding of the soul. What people do with it is a completely different story, because how we see souls may be completely different than how, let's say, China sees souls. That's a whole other story. There might be other cultures that don't acknowledge it at all for cultural reasons or whatever. But inherently speaking, a majority of the people do understand it, or at least see it happening. One of those things, or at least aspects of the soul, that is something that is quite common to hear about or talk about, is the inner monologue. As I've talked about it in a previous episode right here, about how I refer to myself as we a lot. And that we is representative of myself and my inner monologue that talks out loud in theory. So whenever I talk to my wife, I'm like, we, I say that a lot. And that gets me in trouble. I've already explained that sometimes, because I have to explain, oh yeah, I'm also counting my inner voice too. Now, the thing is though, not everybody has the inner monologue, and we'll get into that. But the entire episode today is going to be looking at that particular part of the soul, if that exists, and also why the inner monologue may or may not be important, and all of those things in between, because the soul is going to be an all-encompassing topic. So there's going to be more, obviously, than one episode. This is going to be an ongoing series. I currently will have technically four, but three ongoing series on this channel, and this will be the next one, because this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, particularly because the soul itself as a concept is super interesting, because you can look at and talk to anybody about it, but a lot of the time there's not really much to grasp on it. It's just so different and metaphysical and just unknown to a lot of people, because it's like they try to explain it, but it doesn't sound right. It's kind of like one of those metaphysical concepts like love almost, but love is a little different, and that'll get its own episode. But this is just beyond that. So with that being said, we'll get into more detail and introduce a few more things when we get double the race.
All right, so started this day off with a single arm lat pull down, which is pretty good. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand. And like I like to start many of these series, let's start with this. Soul, noun. The immaterial essence, animating principle, or actuating cause of an individual life. 2. The spiritual principle embodied in human beings, all rational and spiritual beings, or the universe. Or 3. A total person's self. There are a few others that are in here. There are a few other definitions in here that would make sense just as equally as this, but I think those three are pretty good, especially when looking at something like the soul, because it's such a random metaphysical concept. But yet, if discussed with most people, I think they understand it inherently, which is part of the point of this entire series. In this series, I'm going to try to look at questions and actually try to figure it out. For example, do we all have one? Who doesn't have one? Why wouldn't they have one? Things like that. I want to actually look into these things and why, and if there are certain aspects of these questions that can't be answered by just looking at it or just trying to figure it out, because there are certain things that always interest me, such as the idea of, if you don't have one or you found out you don't have one, would that freak you out? Would that honestly cause you a mental breakdown because you realize that you've had no soul? But speaking of mental breakdowns, that's part of what we're going to be talking about today in the inner monologue. Now, some people I've seen believe that the idea of having an inner monologue guarantees the fact that you have a soul, as you have somebody discussing your thoughts with you internally. But I've also heard of people who don't have inner monologues being regular people. Now the question is, do these people have souls? And that's in essence the real question, right? If you don't have an inner monologue, what makes you think you have a soul? But then again, what makes me think I have a soul and not something else because I have an inner monologue? So it's a little bit of a back and forth, which makes little to no sense, but also kind of makes certain sense. Personally, I would say that more so, not only does an inner monologue kind of important in a certain sense, but as well as the actions of the person. I think that understanding whether or not the person is what compels the person's flight forward into life may prove to be more of a consideration as to whether or not they have a soul, or because not of the inner monologue. I do believe the idea that having the inner monologue would help you point you towards the right directions to make sure that you are maximizing your ideal life and or the will that you want to put out there into the world, so that way you can make sure that it is going the way that you're supposed to go, as the soul will guide you towards what you want and what you need to do. But I also have a feeling that those who don't have the inner monologue might be a little bit more lost, a little bit more unaware of where to go. No, that doesn't necessarily mean they're completely soulless, because I don't think that they are just hedonistic like creatures that are just roaming the earth, just doing absolutely whatever they want to for pleasures that beyond what they can imagine. But I do believe that there is somewhat of a arm's length that can be had with someone like this, because they don't necessarily know what's driving them. And that can be an issue, especially because that could be something where they are just looking for the pleasures of the world instead of what would be soul would be telling them. Now, the question is, if you ask somebody like this, would they freak out, or would they be like, what's going on? Am I okay? Am I soulless? But then again, if a lot of people like to conflate the idea of having soul and soulless as somebody, good and or evil, they like to conflate the two, when I believe in reality, it's not necessarily that, but it's more so to the will of yourself being able to be actualized within your life, really. So if you have something like an inner monologue, it can help you go somewhere with your life and push you into whatever you need to get done, rather than have no inner monologue and making it so that internally there's no guide, there's no nothing. There is just emptiness, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, because there are people who have inner monologues who can perform evil, but then there are other people who have no inner monologue, but then can be easily manipulated by the fact that there is nothing to push back from what is coming on the outside. So they can become, in essence, what they would consider soulless, but also it depends as well who they surround themselves with. So it is a very interesting dynamic when looking at it, because you could interpret it as, if you have an internal monologue, you have a better chance of being a good person, whilst the other side, if you don't have an internal monologue, you have more of a chance to being an evil person. Now, not to say that they can't do the other way, but also it's more so of an idea because there is internal pushback that will allow the soul to want to go somewhere where they allow it to. It's interesting to think of it like this, because if you add the good and evil dynamic to it, it makes it a lot more complicated, because you'll hear that these people are soulless creatures or whatever, that are especially like killers and all these terrible people who do commit crimes and all that other stuff. But in essence, they could have corrupted souls for many different reasons. And it could be that they were once like, it could also be that they inherited the soul from someone else, or from a previous life, or something along those lines, because the soul is such a unique idea within and of itself that we don't necessarily know where or what or how it would come about. So in essence, the idea of them inheriting it is technically possible. So that's why looking at it all in all of it is why I wanted to start this series, because it is such an interesting interdynamic nature, especially when it comes to good and evil, because people will jump to the fact that if you have a soul, you are good. But in reality, that's not necessarily the case. It's just you're more predisposed possibly for good, but not necessarily fully. And the opposite is true. You're not predisposed to evil just because you don't have an inner monologue, but you might be more able to be influenced by those around you. So it's a lot of things that go on and factors that happen within the soul. And that's why I wanted to start this as a series within it on its own, because looking at it, you could talk to anybody about it, really, like they will understand it. But the question is, why do we all inherently understand it? What happened, or what's going on mentally that we all kind of get it?
And also, they might not be listening to their soul. Who knows what they could be internally and listening to? Could be a demon for all we know. But that's a whole other discussion for a whole other day. And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, back to the main subject matter for today. The Soul, Part 1. Inner Monologue. So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because this is a subject matter I've been wanting to do a series on for quite some time. And I wanted to start here with the inner monologue as part of it, because I think that it is a key factor when it comes to describing or thinking about the soul as a thing, really, because I think that many people have the inner monologue. They have their internal voice, in which cases they are guiding them or telling them things to do. The impulse, if you will, occasionally will come up through that or anything like that. But it is a being within us that is telling us what to do. And some people don't have that. And it's a very interesting idea, because then we have to think about why. Why do certain people have it and certain people don't? And what is the significance of it? Does that mean those who don't have it have no soul? Is it? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I probably believe some people do believe that, but at the same time, just because they don't have a inner monologue does not mean that they can't have soul within them or understand what soul is. So it is something that is a very interesting dynamic between two different types of people. It's like those who have and those who have not. And it is a difficult thing to describe to those who don't have it. They can understand it in a certain sense, but it is different if you've never experienced it. Like for me, I have an inner monologue. I can understand it and sense it, but also if it goes away, I know something's off, like something isn't right. But then again, I think that's what I've had forever. So then thus life without it is just a rarity. It would be like impossible almost. Even something like meditation where you shut it down isn't necessarily shutting it down. It's more of a just freeing of the mind, and letting go of everything. But the monologue is still there. The internal voice is still there. So it's an interesting dynamic. But as well, generally speaking, the soul is just an interesting thing to talk about. I think I wanted to discuss it more because I think a lot of people like to talk about it, but they talk about it in a surface level or really just never really dive deep into it, or at least try to explore the ideas behind the soul, because they'll say it, but they won't mean anything behind it. There's a very surface level understanding to it, and I want to get deeper into it because I think it's such a vast and untapped potential of a conversation, especially because we all kind of get it. So I think that once talking about it, or at least in some sort of way, shape, or fashion, and there is no right or wrong in this per se, because there is no there are definitions of certain things in surface level points, but realistically, what is the soul is such a broad and all-encompassing topic that you can go in many different directions. We can probably go into historic levels. We can go into the wills of people. What is a driving force? Is will of the part of the soul? Is soul the soul that gives people the will to do things? Things like that, where there are inner exchanges between ideas and ideologies within in and of itself that go along with the soul. It's a very fascinating idea and concept, and I want to just explore it because I think the more that we could try to at least figure out certain parts of the soul, I think that would help. That would just be good to know generally. I think a lot of the time, whenever we look at the issues with a lot of society and all these other things, it is because a lot of people have lost those parts of the soul to them, and then thus have been darkened to the point that they've become black and or have gone away. And because of that, the soul is basically lost in a lot of people. And maybe they still have it, but it is buried beneath all these other things that essentially don't nearly matter as much. You know, the wandering person, the person that doesn't know anything, doesn't want to do anything, you know, the person that is going through the motions, the person that died at the early age of 20 and is just living it out. See this episode about that. Things like that, those types of things all really come down to the end baseline level of the soul. So that's why I wanted to start this particular series of topic, and we will get into more and more as time progresses. This one's going to be picked up and beyond every once in a while wherever I get an idea for it. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. Please, if you have any ideas of what the soul is or anything like that, please leave it in the comment section down below. Or if you have an inner monologue or don't have an inner monologue, please let me know in the comment section down below. Or if you're using an AI chatbot, please let me know what the AI chatbot says about this in AI language, please. But anyways, with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there. Stay warm. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.